You're muted, honey.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
We
Okay,
can.
great. My name is Marnie. I'm an alcoholic. Um, I'm a little nervous. This is a new experience for me. I did a little bit of Zoom when COVID hit, but otherwise I've done in-person meetings, and I haven't told my story on Zoom. So just bear with me. I'll get in the swing in a minute. My sobriety date is January 7th of 2017. Um, my home group is We Are Not Saints in Tupelo, Mississippi. We meet on Sundays and Tuesdays. I do have a sponsor who has a sponsor, and ad infinitum, as far as I know. So I'm here today to tell you what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. Um, so I was born and raised here in Mississippi. I'm going to briefly touch on my childhood. I, I will preface by saying I do believe that I'm genetically predispositioned to be an alcoholic. I come from a long line of alcoholics. My dad is one of us, my grandfather, aunts, uncles, siblings. It's, just rampant in my family. My childhood was pretty crappy. It was There was a lot of abuse that took place, a lot of chaos, lots of fear, lots of all of those things. I Any kind of abuse you can think of, I did experience that, and I don't ever remember feeling safe at any point in my life growing up. I do remember just living in fear constantly, and that started very early on. Um, I uh, I started dabbling in some things. Well, let me back up. I think my first drink, I was around 8 or 9. My mom used to keep Crown Royal in the freezer, and I would sneak her Crown Royal and then fill it back up with water. Well, eventually that froze because water freezes and liquor doesn't. And my mom, I remember her pulling it out, and she's like, I thought this wasn't supposed to freeze. And she's not one of us. And she's, a little oblivious, to be honest. But I remember that, and I was like, oh man, I got to stop putting water in it. Like, I got to figure out what to do. From the point that I started drinking, I drank alcoholically. I drank for the feeling from the first time that I did that. I really kind of took off. So I'm going to back up a little bit. So, I said childhood was really crappy. When I turned 12, I moved in with my dad. And like I said, my dad is one of us. He's also in recovery. He actually is going to celebrate 39 years this year. I've never seen my dad take a drink. And growing up, he really he fought hard for me to get me out of the situation that I was in. And unfortunately, in Mississippi, daddies didn't get custody. And it didn't really matter what was happening. But when I turned 12, I told the courts I wanted to move in with my dad. And I did. He and my stepmom were both in recovery. And that was the first time that I ever remember feeling safe, feeling secure. We had a very happy home. And that was a really, really good time in my life. When I turned 14-ish, my stepmom relapsed, and after like 10 years of recovery, and our family was just torn apart. She kicked me and my dad out. She kicked her kids out. Things just got really crazy again, and that's when I really took off in all of my stuff. My first treatment center, I was 14 years old. My entire teenage years, I spent institutionalized, either in a rehab, a behavioral health facility, the juvenile detention center. I had to go to military training school at one point because the courts were just outdone with me. And anyway, it was just like I said, from the moment that I started putting things in my body, I was doing that alcoholically. There were never any breaks. It was always full gas go. And, I was going to do whatever I was doing, um, to the point of being messed up. I say that I'm an alcoholic, and I am an alcoholic. That is what my story ended with. But I do think it's pertinent to mention that I did not start out with alcohol. I was doing other things, and I share that because in the end it was only alcohol, and that still took me out. I thought that, as long as I left the drugs alone, as long as I, only drank, that I would be fine. And in my early 20s, that's what I did. I met my husband, I had my daughter, and she saved my life, truly. I was doing some hard things at that point, and I knew that I had to somewhat get it together to be a mom. And so I left the hard stuff alone and I started drinking. And um I maintained a semblance of control over alcohol for my entire 20s. And I say a semblance because I would it would get really bad, and I'd realize I would have to do something different, and I could reel it in enough to kind of get my life back together, to accomplish some things, to be, a good mom. And I repeated that cycle my entire 20s. I'd quit drinking for like a month, maybe 2 months, and then I would slowly, start drinking again, and it would progress again to where life was falling apart. Um, you know, During my 20s, I did accomplish some things. When I graduated high school, I went into the military. I was a medic in the National Guard. I I went to nursing school. I got a nursing license during all that stuff, because again, I could pull it together, to try to keep my life looking okay. And that was very, very important to me, that I looked like I had it all together. And so that's what I was desperately trying to do all the time, was just look like I had it all together and whatever I needed to do. Um, I During my 20s, there were a few times that I actually came into AA, because my dad, like I said, he's one of us and sober. And, I grew up in the rooms of AA. My dad is actually from California. He moved down to Mississippi in his early 30s, and then met my mom and had me. But he didn't have any family down here in Mississippi. So I've spent many of Thanksgivings and Christmases at the AA house, eating the potluck that everybody brought. Like, I grew up doing that. And I grew up hearing my dad say things like, the only thing you have is your word. You got to make sure you're doing the next right thing. Secrets make you sick. All these AA slogans were drilled into me growing up, and he saw what was happening. And he would tell me, like, why don't you try some controlled drinking? And I my dad and I played music together. And so we played in bars all the time, and he'd be in there with his Sprite, and I'm in there slamming shots and beers and whatever else. And it had gotten bad again, and he was like, Marnie, I want you to try some controlled drinking. And so the one and only time I ever had two beers was a night we had a gig, and I was going to prove to him I could do it. And so I did. I had two beers that night. I was absolutely miserable. I had a splitting wide open headache, and it was the worst night of my life. I was like, this is horrible. And so I tried that again. We were at a bar again, like shortly thereafter, and I did have two beers in front of him, and then I was in the bathroom slamming shots, because there was no way that I could only have two. So that went on for a long time. That's the only time I've ever drank and not got drunk that I can remember. I drank for the effect, and that's what I wanted, and that's what I got. Like I said, came in and out of AA a few times in my 20s, but nothing ever stuck. But the truth is I had not gotten the gift of desperation yet. I wanted the consequences to stop. I wanted people off my back. I wanted to I wanted my life to be together a little more than it was. But I wanted alcohol to be able to be a part of that. And so I wasn't capable of working the steps, because the book is clear. If I don't take step one, there's no point in working the rest of them. That's the step that we have to take 100% all the time. And I just had not taken that step. I knew in my soul that I was probably an alcoholic. The book talks about that. We suspected we were down for the count long ago, and I did. And but it's a step one is a two-part step. It's admitting I'm an alcoholic, but also that my life is unmanageable. And the unmanageability, I was not capable of admitting that, because that was, the book talks about our great obsession is to control and enjoy our drinking. And, many of us pursue it into the gates of, insanity or death. And I didn't reach that point, thank God, but I feel like I was close. I wanted, I don't know, I just wanted alcohol to be a part of it. I just wanted everybody off my back. Well, fast forward, about a year before I got sober, it had gotten really bad again. And it had, I don't know, at this point, it was probably the worst it had gotten prior to me getting sober. So I came into AA and I was like, I'm going to really do this thing. Well, I was not drinking, but I was smoking marijuana and working the steps with a sponsor. And justifying that behavior by, the only requirement is a desire to stop drinking. Like, I'm not drinking. I don't want to drink, And so I was working steps and I got into my fifth step with my sponsor. And I told her, I was like, I've been smoking, weed or whatever. And she said, honestly, you're wasting my time. She said, you will not have a spiritual awakening if you are putting outside substances inside your body. It will not happen. So that's the purpose of the steps. And you're not going to have it as long as you're doing this. And I'm just not willing to do this anymore. And so then I was justified in drinking again. That was her fault. And so that's what I did. I met this man and he drank a lot, and I started drinking again because I was justified in my behavior. And that was the last year of my drinking. Prior to that year, there were periods of time where I was not able to drink like I wanted to because I did not have the financial resources to do so. And so there were periods of time I didn't, that I didn't drink. And I don't know. I think that kind of tricked me a little bit into thinking, maybe I was okay. I don't know. But that last year, and God, I thank God for this year. This man that I met was very wealthy, and I moved in with him, and we had a wet bar, and there was an unlimited supply of alcohol all the time. And he was a heavy drinker. I don't know if he's one of us, that's not for me to say, but he definitely drank like I drank. He drank really heavy. And so my drinking wasn't being judged or monitored or watched or, anything like that. And I got to see how I actually drink. And by the end of that year, I was keeping whiskey in my car at work, and taking shots of whiskey when I went outside to, smoke a cigarette. I was drinking whiskey on my lunch breaks, doubles at the grill, at the bar on my lunch break. I was still smoking marijuana at this point. Like I said, it's just pertinent to my story. But I didn't draw a sober breath the last year. And, in the evenings, I would make really stiff whiskey drinks to kick me off and then have 4 to 5 bottles of wine a night. And, trying to go to work, and I did. I kept my job, and I was still in my. I have 2 children. At the time when I got sober, they were 8 and 10, and I had them half the time. They were with me a week, with their dad a week, and I would kind of pull it together the week I had them, and then the week I didn't have them, all bets were off. Well, it was getting to where I couldn't really draw that line anymore, and I was putting them to bed at like 7:30 at night, so I could do what I wanted to do, and I was just messed up all the time, and I'd gotten to where I was really physically sick. I couldn't eat. Um, I would, I did not drink when I didn't eat when I drank, and so I wasn't not going to eat supper. I would wake up in the morning so sick to my stomach that if I did not vomit when I brushed my teeth, that I would stick my fingers down my throat to make myself vomit to try to get some of the alcohol off of my stomach. So breakfast was not an option. And then at lunch, my stomach might be a little settled to choke down a little bit of lunch. And that rocked on there. Like I said, this was in that last year. What's wild to me, I share all that, how physically sick I was. And I was, oh my God, like I just felt horrible all the time. That wasn't even what brought me through the doors. For me, it was mental. I had gotten to the point where I wanted to die. And, I didn't have any plans to commit suicide. I didn't have a thought out plan, but I definitely would have thoughts of, will be fine if I didn't wake up in the morning. Or what if I ran off this bridge, or what if I hit this tree, or, I would think about taking my life, but like I said, not a plan. But then my very next thought would be like, you cannot do that to your children. What are you thinking? But I just didn't want to be here anymore. And I absolutely hated myself. I'd gotten to where I couldn't look in the mirror. I was so disgusted with who I was. I would just tell myself the most awful things. I hated myself so much. I knew that my children, both of my children were very smart, and they were getting older. And I was like, they're about to figure me out. They are about to figure out exactly who and what I am, and they're not going to want to have anything to do with me. And I'm going to be this old, lonely old lady on the front porch with my whiskey and my cigarettes, and nobody's going to come see me, and everybody's going to hate me, and I'm going to be alone because no man is going to put up with me. I'm never going to have a relationship. I'm not going to have my children. I'm not going to have my grandchildren. And that's all I could think about. I also lost my best friend, who was not one of us. She was absolutely precious. She died of some health problems a couple months before I got sober. I had a stepbrother that I grew up with, that I loved dearly, was murdered that year in a drug deal gone bad, just a month apart from my best friend. This happened like October, November. December, the man broke up with me. And we were still living together because he did not want to ruin my children's Christmas. He is a very good man. And, so everything was just falling apart. And, I used to be this very happy drunk, like if I was having a bad day, I could have a drink and it'd make everything better. The alcohol stopped working, and I no longer found any joy or happiness in anything. And all I did was either cry and feel so sorry for myself and hate my life, or I was so angry that I was putting holes in walls and busting phones and, screaming at people. And, there was just, that's all that was left, was anger and sadness. So the beginning of December, I decided alcohol was definitely a problem, and I was going to quit drinking. And so the month of December, I quit drinking and sat on my hands and white knuckled for that entire month, and was absolutely miserable. Alcohol is all I thought about 24/7. And it was Christmas Eve and we were going to the man's family. We're breaking up. We're not even going to be together. And I got to go pretend that everything's fine at this family event. And I was standing in the kitchen taking shots of whiskey, bawling my eyes out because for the first time in my life, I really did not want to drink and I could not drink. And that was the first time that ever happened for me. Prior to that, I wanted the consequences to stop. I wanted everybody off my back. At this point, I really didn't want to drink and I couldn't stop. And that's when I took step one. I knew in that moment, not only was I an alcoholic, that my life was absolutely unmanageable. January 7th is my sobriety date. I came into AA. And I thank God I knew where to go, growing up with my dad, all the treatment centers he put me in as a teenager. Throughout my 20s, I'd gone and, I knew that there were people in AA that were not drinking and they were happy. And I didn't know what else to do, so I came to AA and got a sponsor. It was really cool. My sponsor was actually one of my stepmother's very good friends back when she was sober when I was a child. And so I remembered her and, I got her and, just started working the steps. I didn't go to treatment. I probably should have gone to detox if I'm just being honest. I was very physically sick. I had the shakes. I couldn't eat, the whole 9 yards, but I still had a job, and that was the thing is I like, just to touch on how I, thought I had it all together. I had a job, I had my kids, I had this, I had that, but even with all those things, looking in from the outside looking in, it looked like it was fine, but I was dying. And, so I just went into AA. Like I said, I got a sponsor and I started working the steps. For the first time, and this was pivotal for me because all of the years that I'd been in and out of AA, I did not know that the steps took the obsession away. I thought that I was going to come into AA and have to sit on my hands for the rest of my life and just try to not drink, go to a bunch of meetings, hang out with sober people and fight these thoughts in my head all the time. And for the first time, I heard that the steps took the obsession away. That's a 10th step promise. It says we cease fighting anyone or anything. We will recoil from alcohol as if from a hot flame, that it will be removed from us. And I guess, we hear things when we need to hear it. I heard that and that gave me so much hope because I couldn't imagine going the rest of my life and fighting off the urge to drink. That obsession was driving me mad. But I heard that and that gave me hope and I dove into the steps. Like I said, I'd already taken step one by the time I got to AA. I knew that I had no control. I knew it was unmanageable. I'd proven that on Christmas Eve. Steps 2 and 3, prior to coming this time, those were difficult steps for me because I considered myself an atheist. Come to find out, I was more on the agnostic leanings. Honestly, still am. I'll touch on that a little more as we go through. But by the time I got here this time, I wasn't struggling with that anymore because, my sponsor told me to make a list of who God is and who God isn't to me. And that's what I did. And I had a whole bunch of things that he wasn't to me because I grew up in the South, and church can be a little, for me, it was a hard thing. I was just told some narratives that were for me damaging. But on the side of who God is, I knew that he loved me. The book talks about it. He is the Father, we are his children. He is the principal, we are his agents. Most good ideas are simple. And that's what I clung to. I clung to the fact that I could choose my own higher power. It didn't have to be anything that anybody else said, and that God loved me. And that whole he's the Father and we are his children, that that one right there got me because I do have a good earthly dad that loved me, so I did have something to cling on to with that. I have a friend who, God, he's 10 years sober and he still struggles with the God idea. What he was told to put an extra O in there, change God to good, but what else can he be other than good? And so anyway, I started, immediately my sponsor put me in steps 10, 11, and 12. She put me on page 86 through 88, told me to read it every morning and every night. Ask myself the questions on those pages. She had me get up every morning, do my 3rd step prayer, my 7th step prayer, and read some, AA literature. And that's what I did. I took every suggestion that was given to me. I'm one of those people that I have to have it figured out to do it. You can't just give me an instruction and think that I'm going to blindly follow what you tell me to do. I need the justification. I need the reasoning. I need you to explain to me why this is going to work, and this time I finally was desperate enough that I just couldn't do that anymore. I took suggestions when I did not understand them. She told me to be at the building on Saturday morning to do cleanup. And I'm in there scrubbing toilets going, why in the world am I doing this? She had me picking women up from the treatment centers and carrying them to meetings. She had me coming early to make coffee, staying after the speaker meetings to do cleanup. And, there were all of these things that I did not understand why I was doing them. She had me carrying meetings to the treatment center at just a few weeks sober. And I didn't understand it, but I just did what was suggested of me. Because I was so tired of what I was getting. I finally knew that I did not have the answers. And so, I did everything that she asked me to do. I make jokes that if someone had told me to lick the bottom of their shoe, that would keep me sober when I got here, I probably would have done it. That gift of desperation. And that's where I was. So I did. I started doing all those things, like I said, 12th step work. She had me making the coffee and doing the cleanup, the 12 and 12 talks about that. Like, yes, sponsoring is pivotal. That's 12th step work, but it's also all the other things that go into it. So she had me doing those things. And the first 5 years of my sobriety, I never prayed a personal prayer. The book talks about, we don't pray for our own selfish ends, only when it's to help others. And, we ask for God's will. And I just knew I didn't know what the hell to pray for. And I just wasn't praying, and I didn't really know who he was anyway. And so I did the prayers out of the book: 3rd step prayer, 7th step prayer, St. Francis prayer, resentment prayer, a lot, because, I have a problem with those. We're going to get to that too. But that was, step 2. I finally was able to have a willingness to believe. And that is what the book says is required. Nothing more, nothing less. All I have to have is a willingness to believe. And so I finally hit that point and, believed he could restore me to sanity. Step 3 was explained to me by my sponsor is just a willingness to work the remainder of the steps. The wording of step 3 confused me. I'm like, what am I turning over? How do I turn it over? I'm a doer. And I was like, this seems like a very passive step. And I didn't really know how to do that. And so that's what she told me. She said, God's will for you is to work the rest of the steps, to be of maximum use, to God and to your fellows. And the only way that you're going to achieve that is through working these steps. And so that's what I did. Step 4, I don't know. Prior to this time, I was a little nervous about 4 and 5. I wasn't this time. I honestly was very excited. The book talks about, this being where we really start to see some changes. We feel like, the 5th step's when we feel like we belong in the program. And I was ready for that. And so step 4, I wrote it all down. And, there were things that I put on my 4th step that I wouldn't even write it all the way out because I was terrified someone might find it. And so I just wrote initials, I knew what that letter meant, to make sure that I talked to my sponsor about it when I did my fifth step. Um, I had to get rid of that stuff. I was a fraud. I had never been completely honest with anyone. There were so many pieces of myself that I felt that I kept hidden away. I was this way with this person and this way with this person, and Lord, don't let them cross over because they might figure out that I'm not really who I say I am in either situation. I was who I needed to be wherever I was at that point in time. And I was tired of those inconsistencies. I wanted something different. There's a part in the book, and it's around step 4 and 5, but it talks about we wanted to enjoy a certain reputation, but we knew in our hearts that we didn't deserve it. And I remember the first time I read that, I started sobbing, because that was what I had been trying to explain for years, was that I felt like a fraud. And, I just didn't want to be her anymore. So step 4, I wrote it all down, got in there with my sponsor, and I told her everything. My fifth step was like 4 or 5 hours. Um, you know, there were lots of times that I just had to look in my lap and just sob. I couldn't even look at her. And, I'm so grateful I had the sponsor that I had, because she did share things with me about herself, that were similar to my story, and it helped me not feel so alone and so horrible. And you know I don't know, that fifth step, I did experience the fifth step promises after that. It says we feel like we're walking hand in hand with our creator. Our I can't remember, excuse me, but that was one of them. Talking about our fears falling from us, like those things really did start to happen for me. um Step 6 and 7, some people say those are a one and done. I'm not rendered white as snow. you know, uh, 12 and 12 talks about that. We're never going to be rendered white as snow. I have to have God's help in dealing with these character defects. Does that mean that I take a passive stance in it? Absolutely not. I have to actively work on being a better person. But there's so many parts in the book where it talks about, you know, like resentments. We can't be rid of them. We have to have God's help. Fear, we have to have God's help. My character defects are no different. I had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but I could not live up to them. And that was proof for everything leading up into coming into AA. And even now, like, I still can't do this by myself. I still have to have God's help. And so, I do, like I said, I pray the 7th step prayer every morning. I still do that. I do my 3rd and 7th step prayer every single morning without fail. Um, Steps 8 and 9, that's where the good stuff was for me. That's when I really started experiencing some freedom. The promises that we read, those are 9th step promises. I did experience some of those promises prior to getting to that step, but they did not all come to fruition for me until I completed my 9th step. I'm a little ashamed to admit I was 5 years sober before I completed mine. I initially I got all of the ones out of the way of like people that I had hurt emotionally, physically. My financial amends, I absolutely refused to take care of them. And as a result, I did not get rid of the fear of my financial insecurity. The first 5 years of my sobriety, I still struggled a lot financially. I was refusing to pay those amends. And at 5 years sober, I finally did. I had I had not filed my taxes in 8 years. Golly, I 5 years sober, not filing taxes. A degum nurse, not filing my taxes. Like insane. But I was terrified. what had happened is when I got my nursing license, I went from waiting tables to nursing, and my taxes looked very different, and I had to pay in 1 year. And I never paid them, and then I never filed my taxes again. And I'm 5 years sober, and I wanted to go back to school to advance my nursing career. Well, you cannot do that if you haven't filed your taxes. You can't get any, grants or anything without filling out what's called a FAFSA, and it goes off of your tax records. And so I finally, and this is sad for me to say, but it's like this with a lot of things in my life. Until my feet are put in the fire, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to sit there and do nothing. And that's what I did until my feet were put in the fire. And I was, at a crossroads, had met an obstacle that I couldn't overcome, without doing this. So I finally did it. Well, I'll tell you one thing. I ended up getting a ton of money back. Like thousands of dollars. And, you know, I share that because fear is a boogeyman. It's not real. For me, it still can paralyze me. It can still make me feel, like I just can't move. I can't take care of it. But every time I push through that fear, I come out on the other side, and it's never as bad as I thought it was going to be. And that was one of those experiences for me. So I got all that taken care of, and finally got to experience the, freedom from fear of that. Like I said, 10, 11, and 12, those are things that I'm still practicing in my life. I started off doing those immediately. My 10th step, I go off of page 86, the questions there, but for me personally, when things get real bad for me, I write it out just like I did on my 4th step. I flip back to the 4th step in the book, and I do my 4 columns. I do, what I'm resentful at, what it affects, and then my mistakes. And I say my mistakes, it is not my part. The book is very clear. It says when I'm resentful at someone and I'm looking at that 4th column, I'm not looking at my part, because if I'm looking at my part, that insinuates that they had a part as well. The book says that's not what we're doing. We're supposed to look at them as if they have never done us any harm. They are white as snow, completely blameless. And where were we at fault? Where have I been selfish, dishonest, afraid? How have I caused harm to these people? It doesn't matter what they did. My behavior should not be contingent on what someone else's behavior is. I'm responsible for that. And so when, and like I said, I struggle with resentments. It's not near as bad as it once was, but that's something that I have to be very mindful of. When I utilize the prayer. For me, the book says we cannot get rid of resentments. We cannot wish them away any more than we could wish away alcohol. We have to have God's help. That's what the book says, and throughout my sobriety, that book has proven to be true over and over again. And so when I'm resentful, that's what I do. I write it out. I do my 4 columns. I look at where I have caused them harm, and I pray that prayer. And I don't just pray it one time. I pray that prayer in the morning and in the evening. And sometimes that prayer sounds like, cussing about these people, while I'm praying that prayer. Because the reality is sometimes my anger is justified. Sometimes people really do hurt me. It's not always fabricated. A lot of times it is, but not always. But the book says that I can't afford those resentments. It doesn't matter, justified or unjustified, they're still going to kill me. And, so it doesn't really matter. I have to be rid of that stuff. And so I pray that prayer. And it works. I've had some things happen in sobriety. I can think of one specifically where when I did that 4th column, I really had a struggle with it because there wasn't much to put there. Even after reviewing it with my sponsor, I really had to dig to find some things to put in that 4th column, because the grievance against me was pretty bad. And I prayed for that person after I rolled around with it for a little bit now, because I can't just let them off the hook immediately. But what happens is, used to, I would, I lived in that anger. It felt good, and I reveled in it, and it almost became my identity at some of the things that I was angry at. But as time has gone on throughout my sobriety, that doesn't feel good anymore. And so I can't sit with resentments like I once did. Sobriety has given me such a peace and happiness that when things are unsettling for me and they give me that ick in my belly, I can't live with that stuff. Not like I did. So I get a lot more willing, to do the work. Step 12, step 11, like I said, I'm still doing my prayer and meditation every morning. That's not something that I slack on.
Dana Cobb,
I will
Mississippi,
say
is the
that,
co-host now.
I was about a year into sobriety, and I had a friend who, I was doing prayer and meditation hit and miss at that point. And I had a friend in sobriety, and she was like, I have been doing my prayer and meditation every morning for the last year, and it has changed my life. And I was like, I'm going to try that. I'm going to get, committed to that. And so I did, and it was life changing. The 12 and 12 says that we would no more do without it than we would air, food, or sunshine. And, for those that have really put that into practice, and that was my experience, I will not do without it, because it is life changing for me. It changes how I perceive the world. And so therefore, it's a lot more easy to be kind and considerate and compassionate and loving and tolerant, and all those spiritual principles that this program teaches me to be. It's easier to be that when I'm connecting with my creator.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. All right. Step 12. 12th step work has been pivotal for me in my sobriety. I do sponsor. I love to sponsor. In the book, it says that nothing so much ensures immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. That has been my experience. I've walked through things in sobriety, and sponsorship saved my ass. Because if I'm thinking about you, I'm not thinking about me. And so I'm a firm believer in 12th step work and all the other service work as well. I do want to touch on some things that sobriety has given me. AA has saved my life and changed my life, and has helped me be the woman that I always wanted to be, that I did not know how to be. I no longer live in fear. Like I said, my life was full of fear. My whole life had been fear from the moment that I was born. I don't live in fear today. Do I have fearful moments? Absolutely. But there is that underlying piece that I know everything's going to be okay. No matter what comes down the pipe, I'm going to be okay. And I never had that before. I have a beautiful relationship with my children. They come to me, they talk to me. We are very, very close. I have a close relationship with my brother and his family. And that's saying a lot, because I was angry, y'all. I had pushed everybody away, and my family comes to me now for advice and support, and all of those things. Sobriety's given me confidence, because again, I'm finally who I say I am. I'm not pretending to be one person here and one person here. It's all fluid. It all matches. If you see me here, I'm the same there and everywhere else. I know who I am, and I walk in that confidence. I have emotional stability. I mentioned that, I was very angry and punching holes in walls and, sad all the time. That's gone. Life is very, very beautiful today. And it's all because I finally got willing to work the steps. Nothing worked for me except working the steps. I've got one thing I'm going to read, and then I will be done. This comes out of the 12 and 12, step 12, page 106. When a man or a woman has a spiritual awakening, the most important meaning of it is that he has now become able to do, feel, and believe that which he could not do before on his unaided strength and resources alone. He has been granted a gift which amounts to a new state of consciousness and being. He has been set on a path which tells him he is really going somewhere, that life is not a dead end, not something to be endured or mastered. In a very real sense, he has been transformed because he has laid hold of a source of strength which, in one way or another, he had hitherto denied himself. He finds himself in possession of a degree of honesty, tolerance, unselfishness, peace of mind, and love of which he had thought himself quite incapable. What he has received is a free gift, and yet, usually, at least in some small part, he has made himself ready to receive it. AA's manner of making ready to receive this gift lies in the practice of the 12 steps in our program. Thank y'all.
Yay! Oh my God, amazing.